Look, Erika Kirk acting weird isn't exactly new at this point, but what is new is that while she's leaning so hard into this grieving widow image lately, there's now also a clip that's not getting nearly enough attention of her on stage talking about Charlie Kirk and slipping in some very, very noticeable shade. It's kind of subtle at first, but once you hear it, it's hard to pretend it's not there. And she said it into a microphone in front of a live audience, and somehow this clip is now flying way under the radar. And what she said reveals way more than she meant to. And real quick, I'm Lauren Paritra. Willa Paritra is sleeping on the floor like a tiny cow. And we're going to ask you to please take a moment to make sure you're subscribed. We currently still have a lead on Katie Miller, wife of Stephen Little Bitch Miller, but that gap is closing in and we need to hold our ground. So consider every sub, every like, every share, every comment, 6 words or more as an FU to Katie and Stephen Little Bitch Miller. So before I get into Erika, I also need to give you a warm up because it turns out, speaking of Katie Miller and Stephen Little Bitch Miller, we're living in a moment where conservative MAGA wives, the MAGA wags, have collectively decided that publicly throwing shade their husband's way is something that they're going to do now. And I need you warmed up before we get into the main event. So Erika Kirk is not the only MAGA wag out there talking shit about her husband, because this week we also got Katie Miller doing the exact same thing. But there's a key difference. The key difference is Stephen Miller isn't dead, except for behind his eyes and in his soul.
I'll tell you one of the good examples. How is it that baby in your belly right now doesn't get rejected by you? Because that baby has half Stephen's genes.
But you don't think that's partly why women have like giant immunological responses while they're pregnant? This is my own personal theory. Like, why have I been more nauseous this pregnancy? Why have I had more eczema this pregnancy?
Without question.
It's because it's more of my husband's genetic makeup than mine in this baby.
But not more, it's equal.
But it's actually good. I'm telling you, this baby's gonna turn out looking like him.
Katie Miller might actually be onto something, because any pregnancy that involves Stephen Little Bitch Miller does sound like it would be pretty difficult. But her explanation is still funny. She says that this pregnancy is worse because the baby has more of her husband's genetic makeup than hers, which obviously raises questions of like, what exactly happened with the other pregnancies? Did Stephen not participate in those? Like, was there a different genetic distribution, a very Elon Musky one? She says she has a theory that more of his DNA means a rougher ride, which is an unfortunate endorsement of the idea that Stephen Miller's genes are a public health concern. And the internet, unsurprisingly, had some thoughts. One person wrote that, yeah, those Nazi genes can be brutal. Another said, somebody needs to school Katie Miller on the fact that genes are evenly distributed between two parents, or that the experience of living with somebody who appears to be more psycho than her could be triggering her eczema, which could also be an immune response. Someone else added that he makes their skin crawl just listening to him on TV. No genes or DNA required. Another comment simply read, makes me sick, no genes necessary. And then there was my personal favorite, that the baby is going to have horns, which makes Katie's theory about bloodlines doing damage land a little differently. It's also funny coming from somebody so deep in this MAGA wellness world, where the general approach to science is basically like, let's just make things up as we go based off of how we're feeling that day. But what makes the whole thing even more layered is that it's not just random people on the internet who feel this way about Stephen Little Bitch Miller. Members of his own family have said it publicly. His cousin, Alyssa Kazmer, has been vocal about her feelings towards him for years now. She once called him the face of evil after the killing of Renee Nicole Good by the state during an ICE operation. She also wrote that Stephen Little Bitch Miller, in his hands, carried that blood. She said she remembered babysitting him as a child and thinking he was a lovable and harmless kid, and that she now grieves what he has become and will never knowingly let evil into her life, no matter whose blood it carries. When Katie says his genetic makeup is making her physically ill, she is in surprisingly large company here. But we are not here for Stephen Little Bitch Miller today. We are here for Erika Kirk, and this is where it gets good. If you've been following this series, you already know about her degree situation. We covered it this weekend. The program that didn't exist at ASU when she says she graduated from it. We've also covered recently the birth date that doesn't match a decade of sworn legal filings from her. The childhood story that the people who were actually there don't recognize. We've gone through all of it in great detail and all the documents. are not kind to her. But today is not about any of that. Today is about something that happened completely in the open, something that she said into a live microphone in a room full of Charlie's fans and people. And I would argue it is more uncomfortable than the head caress moment with JD Vance, because at least that moment, when you look at it, you could kind of explain it away. It's a stretch, but what I'm about to show you, you really can't.
I get this question too of, well, you know, you were a stay-at-home mom and all this stuff, like that's what you should go back to doing or something like that. A lot of people don't realize that before I met Charlie, I had my own company, and I still do. And it was one of those things where I built it in a way where that when I got married and had children, it could run on its own. I didn't have to do day-to-day. I could check in, but I didn't have to do day-to-day. And that's the beautiful thing is, like, young women in here, if you do create a company or a business and you're an entrepreneur, build it in a way that it sustains itself so that when you do find your husband and you have children, family, that's your main focus.
Erika got up in front of all of her minions in the crowd, the people who donated to his organization, who consumed his content for years, who sent money, their own money and flowers and prayers after he was shot. And she described herself as the sole provider for her children.
When people are like, oh, she's now this role, I'm honoring what the Lord has put in front of me, and I'm also honoring my husband's request. And now I have to be the sole provider for my children. And again, this is not a business card opportunity. There's something very biblical in a woman honoring her husband and stepping up and standing in.
That was the phrase she chose, sole provider. And Owens went in. She said the comment discounts who Charlie was, how genius he was, which is also a stretch, how financially savvy he was, and who he was. And that laid out what Charlie actually left behind. And we've also covered this. There were investments, real estate, trust set up for the kids, a work life insurance policy that she says paid out around $10 million. She said it plainly. Charlie always had his financial house in order. On top of his own planning, millions more were raised for Erika and the children after his death by Tucker Carlson, a high-profile donor group came together too, and regular people online who loved Charlie and his racism and wanted to take care of his family. And then Owen said the thing that made people stop scrolling. She pointed out that Erika has a private jet, drivers, full security detail, and that this woman does not open her own doors. And she's been standing in front of audiences describing herself as a sole provider, just trying to scrape on by, just trying to survive for the sake of her kids. Now, here's where I need you to slow down with me. When Erika got pushback on taking the CEO role, when people asked why she wasn't just going back to being a stay-at-home mom the way Charlie's movement always told women to do, she had a response ready. She said she had built her own business before she ever met Charlie, that she designed it to run without her. Once she had a family, that it could operate on its own, and then she defended the whole thing, the career title, the platform, all of it, as an act of faith. She said there is something very biblical in a woman honoring her and her husband, stepping up and standing in. So she is framing the CEO role as devotion, as the godly thing to do. And I need you to hold on to that framing while I tell you this last part, because this is what Erika Kirk just accidentally confirmed. Charlie did not spend years building a movement about women running organizations. The trad wife content, all the stay-at-home, raise your children stuff, submit to your husband messaging, that was not a side note in what Charlie built. That was his whole point. The thing he said on every stage and every podcast and every panel he ever sat on, and Erika Kirk stood next to him and co-signed every word of it in front of millions of people. She was the proof of concept, the living demonstration that Charlie's vision of womanhood was real and attainable and beautiful and blonde and full of MAC counter makeup. And now she is the CEO. She's on a PJ, she's given speeches, and she's running the organization while making decisions. And she's got a microphone in front of Charlie's audience and called herself the sole provider for her children. The man left her an estimated $10 million just from his insurance policy alone. And that is before you count the millions Tucker Carlson and a parade of donors raised for her after he was. She also has a PJ, a security detail, and drivers who open every door for her. And somehow this woman is standing in front of people implying that he left those kids with nothing. That is shade. And she's out here doing that. And she's saying she's out here doing this alone. She is now a career woman, the breadwinner, the independent operator that Turning Point USA spent years arguing against, she is doing all of it with his money and his platform in front of his audience. And that is what this Erika Kirk moment actually reveals. It's not like a careless choice of words. Everything about this woman is intentional. It is a woman who stepped fully into a life that her husband's entire movement told women not to want. And she is using that language in front of that exact, in that exact life to ask for sympathy from the people who paid to hear him argue against it. She is telling Charlie's people that she is a struggling sole provider while flying private. She is playing the independent career woman while calling it biblical obedience. And she's doing it all on his stage with his money, with his fans, in front of his audience, while implying he left those kids with nothing. Charlie Kirk spent his entire public life telling men to provide and telling women to receive that and make sandwiches in the kitchen and to do so with gratitude. And his widow walked on stage and disrespected him to his people. The ideology is eating itself, and she is not even trying to hide the fork anymore. And there's a lot more where this came from, and we're going to keep digging in. You do not want to miss what we have going on next. So please make sure you subscribe, like, comment, all of it. I am Lauren P. across all social channels. You can follow me everywhere, and make sure you're subscribed here for more.